All right, welcome. Welcome to Cruise Control. My name's Eric, and tonight we're going to be talking about a few different topics. We're going to start off with the Subaru WRX that I got to drive, the STI specifically, and what this car was like. So if you guys have any questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat down below. Thank you for joining us. It's going to be a fun evening. And this is how it's going to go. We're going to talk about this vehicle. We're going to talk about some car news. We're going to talk about proper break-in procedure and also breaking some of the myths that you guys like to bring up. And then we're going to finish it up by helping you guys find your next vehicle. Thank you so much for joining me. All right, let's go ahead and get started. First, it's going to be on the STI. If you notice, this says 2015. The one that I drove is a 2016. However, similar acceleration times and things of that nature. So the Subaru WRX STI has been like a dream car of mine for a lot of years. In fact, a buddy of mine, back when the Evo used to be out, the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution, the 8 was the first one that came to the United States. Him and I would always debate, oh man, this generation, which would you rather have? And sometimes the Lancer, the Evo would win out. Sometimes the STI would win out, just depending on the year. They both put up similar numbers, turbocharged, 4-cylinder, can fit all your friends and family inside there, relatively reliable, not very fuel efficient because of their power, but you know what? They were fun cars. And now the STI is the last one standing. The Evo is no longer with us. Rumor has it they might bring it back, which would be awesome. Please, Mitsubishi, please bring it back. We'd love to see a new Evo out there, even if it was in EV form. It would just be fun to have the nameplate back. Now, the 0 to 60 time of the one that I drove sounds really fast, 4.8 seconds, and then the quarter mile time of 13.3. But I want you to pay attention to something. There's a difference between 0, which is no miles per hour, to 60 versus 5 miles an hour to 60. 5 miles an hour to 60 is called a rolling start. And to be genuine, that is a better gauge of how much power your car feels like you're driving with versus fancy pretty numbers where you're dropping the clutch and ruining the engine. So if you want to drop the clutch really high and ruin some parts, then go ahead, drop your clutch on your STI and get a 0 to 60 of 4.8, right? That's this one here. However, if you look down just to where it says rolling start 5 to 60, why would it take longer to go less miles per hour? So you're going 5 to 60, so that's only 55 miles per hour covered versus 0 to 60. Why is that faster? Well, number one, Car and Driver does a 1-foot rollout, which means they allow the car to move a foot before they really hit the stopwatch. So 4.8 isn't realistic in the real world. In the real world, you're probably taking 0.2 of a second off of there. The best you can do in the real world is probably 5 seconds, first and foremost. Secondly, rolling start at 6.4. This is how fast the car is going to feel to drive, right? So 6.4, that doesn't sound as fast. That's because it's not. And this is at sea level. Now, where I live, I'm at 6,000 feet elevation. I'm telling you right now, this thing didn't feel that fast. It sounded great. Most of the time, the Subaru Burble of the cars that I've driven, like the FRS, the BRZ, the 8.6, I was not a fan of the original 2-liter that was in those engines. The new 2.4, if you want to check out my videos, I did the manual and the automatic on the GR86, and I can't wait to do the BRZ as well. Those sounded really good. Now, the sound generator had something to do with that, and initially I was against such things as a sound generator, but you know what? I actually like the way it sounded. Anyways, back to this guy. This 2.5, I liked the way it sounded, but you know what? I was actually kind of let down by its speed. I mean, a 13.75 miles sounds fast. 0 to 60 of 4.8 sounds fast until you read 5 to 60 and 6.4. Well, then that's not that fast. And if you're not in boost, this is what happens. So this says top gear from 30 miles an hour to 50 miles an hour if you don't downshift, meaning like let's say you're in 6th gear and you floor it with no boost in, it takes 11 seconds just to go 20 miles an hour. And that's indicative of how the car felt. You really have a narrow power band. And honestly, this vehicle kind of felt old school to me. I didn't necessarily feel like it was part of the new era. Like the power bands seemed really old school. Where you're like, oh, there's a bunch of turbo lag. Yeah, there really was a bunch of turbo lag, and I wasn't a fan. As far as the looks are concerned, it was a normal looking car. I've seen better, I've seen worse. Putting it up against the extreme looks of the Type R, you're probably going to give it to this. This is the Boxer, the 2.5, and it's a decent looking car. It's not offensive. It's got a little hood scoop right here that puts in real air, so that part's nice. Just a normal looking car. These quad exhausts though at the back, they really did sound good. I liked them. The ride was not overly firm for me. I did like the Type R's dampers better because you could choose between comfort and sport. This one you're just in sport all the time, but you know what? It wasn't bad. And there was a differencing of opinion when it came to steering, right? So my buddy Seth, he drove it and he said, hey, the steering feels way too light. And agreed, it is light. And we looked it up and it's a hydraulic rack, in fact. So it's not even an e-pass system. That means it's not electronic steering. It's hydraulic. But you know what? There was good communication. Yes, it was over boosted. It was too soft for it being a sporty vehicle, but I had good communication, so I did like that. The flat bottom steering wheel I liked. The shifter and clutch engagement were interesting. The actual shifter itself looks tall, but it has a really short throw. And then the clutch engagement, normally you're going to bite down here near the floor. It was up a little bit, not quite half, but it was up a little bit higher than what you're used to. Now, of course, you can get used to that when you're driving. What I didn't like is there was no place for my right elbow. Yes, there's a little pad that's down here, but it doesn't match what your left arm's going to do. Your left arm's going to be up like this in the door sill, nice and comfortable, and your right arm is going to be down real low. Silly thing to complain about, I know, but I still complained about it. It wasn't comfortable to me. Then you see how flat these seat bottoms are. This is a sporty vehicle. I don't understand why this section right here isn't up taller to keep you in place. When I was going around corners, I was sliding right out of the seat, so that didn't make much sense to me. The interior, again, kind of like the exterior, is not offensive. It doesn't look fantastic. It doesn't look terrible. It's just kind of there. Of course, I love the Alcantara touches that were here. This little chunky part of the steering wheel, I don't have baby hands, but I'll tell you, these right here, they were hard to get your hand around. So I didn't really like how big those were. Maybe if you're like a giant, like 6'4", 6'5", it feels appropriate to your hands. But for me, I prefer a little bit smaller chunk part that's right there. That would have been just a little bit better for me. The sight lines were good. So it had a low dash. One of my favorite things is the low dash, this little extra window here. So you had really good visibility. So appreciated that. I always love a low dash and big windows. Maybe that doesn't look as good when it comes to styling. Like with the Camaro, they chose small windows. So then it looks really sporty and it looks really cool. But then go drive a Camaro, and even though it has the Alpha platform since 2016, you can't see out of the darn thing. So sight lines are important. So I really appreciated the sight lines. But it seemed to miss, I don't know, it had like a lack of finesse. It seemed to just miss a few things over what I was looking for. Like, say, for example, with the Type R. The Type R's shifter was just better. The clutch was better. The steering felt more accurate. The seats were better. The ride could be both comfortable or sporty depending on how you chose it. It actually had less understeer. Now, understeer is when you're going around a corner. Let's say you're trying to make this left and you get pushed out of that corner. The Type R is front wheel drive, which is the worst for understeer. It causes the most understeer based on the fact that the engine's over the front wheels that are trying to turn, put the power down and turn, therefore you get pushed out the most. And yet, this is all-wheel drive. And this little button down here is called a VCCD. So it's a variable control differential. And you can do these presets, or you can toggle manual and say, hey, I want as much power to be sent to the back as possible. And so I set it up to have as much power to the back because I wanted to induce oversteer. Oversteer is the opposite of understeer. So instead of being pushed out, you kind of have the back end taking you out this way and your front end turns like this, right? So we wanted a balance between those two things. You don't want too much oversteer. You don't want too much understeer. Maybe starting off neutral, maybe especially going into a corner, maybe starting off with a little bit of understeer. And then if you have throttle where you can power oversteer through it, then that's probably going to be your best route. I couldn't get it to power oversteer. In fact, it pushed more than the Type R. Granted, both the Type R and the STI were driven on the exact same roads in very similar conditions, a little bit of gravel on the roads. It wasn't a dirt road, but it was just a regular road with, you could tell that there was a little bit of gravel on there. So I was a little disappointed with that. Steering wheel design, all that kind of stuff. aside, the vehicle is really nice. Here's something that I like about this more than the Type R. Honda only takes care of the passengers that are in the front. In the back, you just get cheap seats. You don't even get a spot to pull your armrest down, things of that nature. But these seats back here, look at the Alcantara that's still back here, the color that breaks back through here. So I like that Subaru did not cheap out for my rear passengers. This is nice. I like that. So that's something that I like better. The styling of the outside of this I liked better. Probably the styling of the inside of this I liked better as well. So there's a few things that I liked better on this STI over the Type R. Not saying the upcoming 2023 Type R, I think the exterior of that is going to look better than this. But it's a good looking car, a little STI that's going to be put into the headrest, a Subaru logo that's going to be on the steering wheel. So you see where it says C diff, this is what I was looking for. So this kind of shows you where the power is being sent. So this one's on automatic, so you're letting the computer decide where you want the power. You can toggle and you can say, hey, I want more power to be sent up front, or hey, I want more power to be sent in the back. And I had it set where the majority of the power was being sent to the back, and yet I still had an abundance of understeer, which is not what I was looking for. All right, so this is telling you how much PSI you have, how much peak PSI to expect for you to have, things of that nature. You have auto dual climate zones, meaning your passenger doesn't have to be the same temperature as your driver, which is nice. So you guys can either be in sync or separate on that. So that part's cool. Here we go. So you see this little plus and minus. As you toggle this up, that sends the power more towards the front. As you toggle this back, it sends more power to the back. You just have to click this for manual or click it again for auto, and then you can choose between Sport, Sport Plus, and Intelligent, and then it'll do stuff for you. There's a nice shot of the engine bay. Mine was not as clean as this one. I wish it would have been. But yeah, so that is the STI in a nutshell. I liked it. It was really good. I didn't love it. I fell out of love in it, or I didn't even get to the love stage with it. I definitely really liked it. If you guys have any questions on a Subaru WRX STI, if you'd like me to find one in your area, go ahead and put that into the chat and I'll gladly look it up for you. If not, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next segment. And that is going to be a controversial topic about break-in. What is the right thing to do for break-in on your engine? What is break-in? Let's go ahead and start with that. So if you look up at your manual inside your car, it's going to tell you to take it easy, and within the first 1,000 miles, you got to drive real nice and don't do anything bad. Why do you think that is? You got to consider your source and who's telling you and why they would tell you such things. There have been countless times when an actual engine failure would occur, but they would blame the customer because maybe they got onto the freeway and they revved it to 6,000 RPM and they go, aha, that's when you broke your car. And so we're going to bill you, until all of a sudden, no matter how many people took care of the engine within the 1,000 miles, now all of a sudden there's just a huge engine recall because it turns out there really was a manufacturing problem in the first place. So look, it doesn't matter if there is a defect in the engine or if it's no defect. Within the first 1,000 miles, in fact, within the first 20 miles, I actually encourage you to rev it almost to redline. If you don't want to bang it off the rev limiter, you don't have to. But let's say it's a 7,500 RPM car, maybe go to 7,000 RPM, and I'm going to explain why. All right, so why would we want to do this? All right, so we want to be able to do this in second, third, or fourth gear. You don't have to do full throttle. The biggest problem with breaking your engine on the street, of course, is, don't get caught. But why would you want to do this? The owner's manual says to break it in easy. Oh, why is that? Consider this. Due to the vastly improved metal casting and machine technologies which are now used, tight parts in the engines are not normal. A manufacturing mistake causing a tight clearance in an extremely rare occurrence these days, but if there is something wrong with the engine clearances from the factory, no amount of gentle driving is going to fix the problem. So why does the owner manual say to take it easy for the first 1,000 miles? All right, good question. What is the most common cause of an engine problem? Failure to warm the engine up completely before running it hard. You got to allow the oil to get everywhere and the temperatures to be correct, which is something you should do. What is the second most common cause of an engine problem? An easy break-in. But why, Eric? Because when the rings don't seal well, the blow-by gases contaminate the oil with acids and other harmful combustion byproducts. Ironically, an easy break-in is not at all what it seems. By trying to protect the engine, the exact opposite happens as leaky rings continue to contaminate your engine oil for the rest of the life of your engine. So this is not good for your engine. You actually want to rev it out and have that set properly. So for any of you guys that were so lovely and sweet in my comment section about how I was just destroying that person's engine, actually, no, I was doing the best thing for that engine, and you should do it as well. All right, unless there's any questions, I'm going to move on from that particular topic. Let's go ahead and check here. Is this also on Twitch? No, this is not also on Twitch. Thank you for asking. All right. If you have any questions on the vehicles that we're talking about, the break-in procedure, first we were talking about the Subaru WRX STI. If you have a question on that, go ahead and put it in. Or if you have a question on proper break-in and actually what you should do versus what the manual tells you to do, please go ahead and put that in as well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move to the news. All right, so the first bit of news is going to be about the Toyota Tundra. All right, so my favorite regular truck, not a specialized truck, is a Toyota Tundra. My favorite truck, period, is a Ford Raptor. Now it looks like it might be the Tundra yet again, because the Tundra is finally coming after the Ford Raptor. I don't know what kind of power it's going to make, but Toyota is saying, hey, we want to come after the Ford Raptor, we want to come after the TRX, and we want to come after the Silverado as well. And it looks like the power is probably going to be with their hybrid, the 437 horsepower, 583 foot-pounds of torque. That would be a practical guess. Or maybe drop the hybrid and just use the twin turbo, but maybe with some bigger turbos to make more power. Drop the hybrid for weight purposes, not because it doesn't make good power, but maybe for off-roading, the weight isn't great. Or maybe we could see a twin turbo of the V8 that's going to be in Lexus products, which is supposed to make around 600 horsepower. So who knows what's going to happen? But you know what? I'm excited for this Tundra. This sounds exciting. Does anybody remember the TRD supercharged Tundra from, I want to say 2010? Somewhere around there. There was a supercharged option that you could buy from TRD. And I want to say the 0 to 60 time on that truck was like 4.4 seconds. So could you imagine something like this from the factory from Toyota? It would put Ford, Chevy, Dodge, all these guys on notice. So I'm excited to see a truck like this that's going to have the Toyota reliability with the off-road capability of a Raptor. That would be pretty awesome. This kind of looks like an updated version of the truck that Marty McFly drove in Back to the Future. His was black, a tiny Toyota truck, but it was lifted like this, had a light bar in the back, so just kind of a throwback from my childhood. I thought that was pretty cool. All right. Do you guys have any questions about that particular article before I move on to the next segment of the news? Please go ahead and put that into the chat if you guys have any questions. If not, I'm going to move on to my next segment. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk about is there might be an automatic in the new Type R. Oh, before you get upset, it's not the only transmission. Of course, it's going to come with a 6-speed manual transmission as standard. I've driven the 10th gen, and honestly, it's the best manual transmission I've ever driven. I'm sure if I got to drive like a Porsche 911 GT3 RS, that thing's got a better manual. But you know what? For the things that I've driven, and I've driven lots of cars, this was the best manual I've ever had. Now, the automatic gearbox that they were talking about here probably is not a normal 6-speed automatic. In fact, more than likely, it's going to be a DCT, which is a dual clutch transmission. Eric, you said save the manuals. You would never buy an automatic. Nah, if this comes out with a dual clutch transmission, I'm going to buy that for about 3 reasons. Number one, it's faster. right? You're going to go around the track faster, which is my main goal to buying a car like this. The Type R is already fantastic around corners. I could not believe how good it was when I drove it. If you guys like to check out that video, go ahead and go to my channel. You can check out how the Type R was. But you put a dual clutch transmission, those are significantly faster at shifting than what you can do in a manual. And it's not like a typical automatic. A typical automatic is slower. So let's say you hit a paddle. It's up on the steering wheel. There's paddles that you can hit when you're in sport mode or manual mode or whatever mode you want to call it. Well, in a typical automatic, when you tell it to upshift, a lot of the times there's a delay. You click the button and you can go 1,000, 2, 1,000, and then all of a sudden it finally clicks, but there's a delay. In a dual clutch transmission, a good dual clutch transmission, let's say a PDK like I drove in the 981 Cayman GTS with 340 horsepower around Speed Vegas. That was a PDK, and that thing was lightning fast at being able to do the paddle shifts. And then of course, when you downshift, not just upshift, it downshifts for you. So it sounds like a manual, it feels like a manual when you're doing it. But in case if you don't want to be driving a manual all the time, let's say you're in bad traffic. I live in a major city like Colorado Springs, Denver, San Diego, LA, New York, Detroit, Chicago, Houston, Dallas, Miami, Seattle. Those are some big cities, Boston, right? So these are some cities that, you know, you don't always want to drive a manual transmission. So a DCT, you can put it back into drive and drive it like normal. But then when you hit the track, you can be like, ooh, it's my time and I want to be able to hit the paddles. Or let's say you don't go to the track, you just go to your favorite mountain windy road. Same story there. So a dual clutch transmission, I'm very excited for. Third reason why I would want one, man, other people can drive your car too. What if you have a spouse that doesn't drive a manual transmission? What if I want them to be able to go to the track or do the twisty mountain roads, and maybe they're not comfortable with a manual, but you know what? They are comfortable with an automatic, and maybe they don't want to use the paddles. Maybe they just want to leave it and drive, but they wouldn't mind going around that. Then it's a shared experience. You can share that experience, talk about it afterwards. Part of driving cars is the culture that goes with it. So if you get to share that experience with someone, it's a bonding moment. So my wife can drive this car. I like that. So that would be some of the reasons why I would want to get the dual clutch transmission. It's faster. That's number one. What if I'm in city and I don't want to have to shift? That's number two. And more experiences with more people would be the third reason. So this should start around should start around $37,000, $38,000. That's the estimate. Initially, there was going to be a power bump. Those were the rumors, but now the rumors suggest there's going to be no power bump. It's going to be the exact same. Here's what I think is going to happen. I think this exact same powertrain is going to show up in the Acura Integra Type S, not the base model Integra, but the Type S. But on top of that, this is front wheel drive. The Honda is not going to come with all wheel drive. That's my guess. I could be wrong. They could put all wheel drive in here, but I believe this is going to be front wheel drive only. I believe that the Integra is going to have super handling all wheel drive, and they're going to get there in one of two ways. The more logical choice, in my opinion, especially with the way things are going with efficiency and you have to meet certain guidelines, I would put an electric motor back here and have it power these rear wheels. And so let's say it's 306 horsepower up here and you got 100 horsepower electric motor back here powering the rear wheels. Then you have a 400 horsepower combined output and you have some power going to the rear. So then that way, maybe you can be getting the back end to slide out a little bit. Maybe you can induce a little bit of oversteer, which would be awesome in a Honda product. It would be a blast. So I think that's going to be the biggest differentiator between the Honda Civic Type R and the Acura Integra Type S. I think the Integra Type S is also going to come with nicer things such as leather. You're not going to get leather in the Type R. Heated seats, you're not going to get that in the Type R. Probably an upgraded sound system, probably a sunroof. All of those types of things you're not going to get in the Type R. So those are all things for the more luxurious Acura Integra Type S, which will probably start at around $43,000 to $45,000, right? So that's where I think this kind of a platform is headed. And you know what? I'm really excited for it. Based on the looks of this 11th gen Civic, I think this Type R is actually going to look good on the inside and out. I think the best angle is this front angle here. I'm not in love with the back here. I've seen a few pictures of this back end. I'm not a big fan. I do like the exhaust though. I hope they have found a way to make the exhaust sound great. There's the bigger center pipe and two smaller pipes on the outsides. In the current Type R, it's smaller in the middle and two bigger pipes. So I don't know what sound profile they're changing, but I do hope it sounds better. Maybe they don't have to use a sound generator in the inside, or maybe they do, but I do hope that it has better sound. That's something that I felt that the Civic Type R was missing, a better sound. But everything else about the car was so good, and you can always make sound yourself, right? You can do an intake, you can do headers, you can do exhaust. So that's something that you can kind of create on your own. But I actually like the way this looks quite a bit. Again, this front is going to be my favorite. And I think the interior is going to look good. I think it's going to drive just as good as the current Type R. If not, they may even find a way to improve it. I don't know how they're going to find a way to improve it, but this might be it right here. They are going to put wider tires on it. So 265s, that's a pretty wide tire, especially on a front wheel drive car. But supposedly it's going to be as wide as a 265, but on a 19-inch wheel instead of a 20. So they're downsizing the wheel, which is fine by me, but they're going to widen the depth. So that might be a way that they're going to be able to pick up maybe some more speed in corners and things of that nature, better handling if you're going to have a wider tire. As you can kind of see even just right here, this is the current gen Type R. You can see how wide this tire is versus this one. I want to say it's about a 245 in the current gen. So it's about 20 millimeters wider on all sides. That's quite a bit more grip that's going to go to the ground. I really like how big this grille is. This is showing me that it's not going to have a cooling issue. When this Type R first came out, it was having a cooling problem out on the track. One of the biggest upgrades that I would do personally is behind this is going to be an intercooler. I would want a bigger intercooler so that way I don't get heat soak when I'm out on the track. I want to make sure it's as cool as possible. And then I would do something like a Honda tuning system, which is going to give me a little bit more power, and then take it to the dyno and have that tuned in. That's about all the power mods I'm going to do because this car doesn't need a lot of power. If I add 50, 60 more horsepower to it, I'm done. After that, it's going to be like a 200 set tread. So that way, when I want to go to the racetrack, I can sit properly. Some track pads, some high temp brake fluid, things of that nature. If I need any kind of roll bars or stuff, I'd have to drive it first. But if it's anything like this generation sitting next to it, I'm probably not going to do much to the suspension because it was practically perfect out of the box. All right, does anybody have any questions on the DCT automatic gearbox? Just as a side note, there is going to be something similar in the GR Corolla. It's actually supposed to come out with an automatic as well. So I think the Golf R started the trend with an automatic. They have their own dual clutch or a manual, of course. But since that kind of took off well, I think that's why Honda is going to put it in their Type R, why they're going to put it in their Type S and the Integra, and that's why Corolla is going to have an automatic as well. When I say Corolla, I don't mean a regular Corolla. It's the GR Corolla. It's a turbocharged all-wheel drive pocket rocket. So that's what I'm talking about. Now, before we move on to the final segment, which is going to be where I help you guys look for a car, go ahead and put any last minute questions that you guys have in there, and I'll be glad to go ahead and answer them for you. If you want me to help you find your next vehicle, this is what I do. I look at vehicles that are in your area. I make sure that it's the best price. We look to make sure that it's not salvage title. We make sure it hasn't had any accidents that you don't want. If it's just a small fender bender, we look to make sure that it wasn't stolen, that it wasn't any kind of a salvage, right? We want a good vehicle. Then we're also going to look at crash test ratings. We're going to look at fuel economy. We're going to look at reliability. So we look at a lot of different things. It's only a $3 donation, and that pays for us to be able to find that vehicle that you're looking for. All right, for me, this is an example of a car that for the price, not much can beat it for acceleration and getting into an EV vehicle, right? So a lot of us are going to be buying our first EV over the next few years. I'm going to be one of them. And I'll be honest with you, the Tesla is still something that I constantly look up, and specifically the Model S P85 or P90D. Why do I look at that one? Well, it's only about $40,000, and I say only. Yes, that's expensive, but it is pretty affordable. But check this out, 0 to 60 of 2.8 seconds. That's right, 0 to 60 of 2.8 8 seconds. And unlike a gasoline car, whether if it was naturally aspirated, turbocharged, or supercharged, at elevation, an electric car does not lose any power. So if this is 2.8 at sea level, it's 2.8 up here at elevation. And so when I'm looking at a car that says 0 to 60 of 5 seconds down at sea level, up here, it's going to do like 6.5. It's going to be like a 1.5 seconds slower. So this car is going to be as fast as advertised no matter the elevation. I like that. Then if you buy an older Tesla, you get the supercharger network for free. For free, that means you can charge your vehicle at no extra cost. So if you're going to buy a $40,000 car regardless, and you pay so much to drive it to and from work because, you know, gas costs money, or if you get a different electric car and you don't have solar panels and you're paying to charge it at home, then you're still paying. Well, supercharger network means if you get it for free, it doesn't matter if you have solar. It doesn't matter if you live in an apartment. It doesn't matter. You can just go charge it for free as long as you live within the range distance of a supercharger, which they're over the whole United States. They're almost everywhere. Here in Colorado Springs, I have them. Pueblo, I have them. In Denver, I have them. So they're pretty much everywhere I want to be. So that way I can charge this guy for free. I like that. So for the money, there really isn't a better deal for performance. Now, I've driven quite a few cars. The Tesla Model S, I've driven the older version, like the 2012. I drove a 2017, and I've driven a Model 3 Performance. So I've driven quite a few Teslas, and the Model S I definitely prefer over the Model 3. It's more comfortable. It looks better. I actually have a gauge cluster. It's more affordable. So, you know, there's a couple of things that I like better about this vehicle. But instead of just looking at how cool the car is, let's also look to make sure that it's reliable. So a place that I go is called carcomplaints.com. I'm not sponsored by anybody. This is just a place that I go. And when I go here, it tells us what's wrong with each vehicle because it's like you and I. We own the vehicle, then we go on here and we report saying, hey, this is a problem that I had. And so that way people like you and I can come on here and be like, ooh, these are the problems that they had. Well, there was only one problem. It was transmission related for this model year. So there's not a lot of problems for it. So that part's good. But what about how safe? What about a crash test rating? Well, we can click on crash test and it got a 5-star across the board for rollover, side, front, no matter what, it got a 5-star crash test rating. So now we know this vehicle is reliable. We know this vehicle doesn't have a lot of issues. All right, we can back up. We were in a 2014, but I backed up because I wanted you to see the different years. So 2013 had the most common issues, but you see here, we went to 2014. So this one is pretty good. All right, now let's look at a couple of other vehicles. You go, Eric, I don't want an EV. I want a gasoline powered car before I'm forced to go down the EV gauntlet where we can't drive gas powered cars anymore. I want something cool, something different, something fun, something exciting, and still affordable. Well, you know what I have as a solution? The 2016 Ford Mustang Shelby GT350 Fastback. This is no ordinary Mustang. This has a 5.2 liter flat plane crank V8 that revs to 8,250 RPM, which means it revs like a Ferrari, sounds like a V8, only, man, if you've never heard one of these cars, they sound amazing. They have different modes in their exhaust, but when you have it on loud, this thing is just a beast of a car. It's fantastic. It's set to go around the track, your favorite mountain road. You get Alcantara on the inside. You have Alcantara on the steering wheel. So yeah, you still have your basic Mustang looks and components, but you know what? This thing is no ordinary Mustang. I'm telling you, this is a fantastic car. If you wanted to have a fun car, but not break the bank, this is definitely going to be able to do that. Now, you go, Eric, $43,000, that's too much. What if my budget is $35,000? That's okay. I also have the solution for you. This is a very similar car. The engine is not as special. Yes, it's still a V8. They go about the same speed, 0 to 60. So really, time-wise, neither one of these is faster than the other. This one, the Shelby, just has a more special engine where it revs to 8,250 RPM. The Chevy's is not going to rev like that. It doesn't have an exotic style engine. It just has a normal V8. But Don't count that normal V8 out. It still makes 455 horsepower. You're still going to get to 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds. This still has Alcantara on the seats. It still has Alcantara on the wheel. This is the 1LE SS. So this says 1SS, that is the trim. And then the package that's on here is called the 1LE. The 1LE is made for the track. You see this front part right here, that's the downforce. You got your bigger wheels, you have your bigger brakes, better suspension, more cooling. Out of the box, you can go around the track. So $35,000, there you go. And if you go, Eric, I don't like either one of these cars. I don't want to buy an American. I like German sports cars, and I'll spend a little bit more for it. Okay. Well, I have the Porsche Cayman S for you. This is going to be a 2014 Porsche Cayman S. 0 to 60 in the mid 4-second range with the manual transmission. So still not slow by any stretch of the means in a straight line. But around corners, this thing is a knife edge. I got to drive a little bit more powerful version of this. Mine was the GTS. So 340 horsepower versus 325. So only 15 horsepower more. Probably only a tenth of a second faster. So when I say just a little bit, I mean just a little bit faster. But some of my favorite things about the GTS is it comes with a better suspension, better brakes. If you haven't heard me say Alcantara enough tonight, I'm going to say it again. This one does not come with Alcantara, which the GTS would. But the GTS is just, it's in a whole different price category. If you can afford it, awesome. If you can't, then this one is a really affordable option. $49,000, manual transmission, looks fantastic. And it's just going to be amazing with the flat six engine just roaring behind your head. It's so nice. It's so much fun. You go, Eric, I want a Japanese sports car. I don't want German. That's going to be expensive when it breaks down. And I don't want an American either. Not a problem. I have a Nissan for you. And I have one that is the most affordable of the evening. So let's say you really want to start going to the track, but you don't want to spend more than $20,500. Well, a 2009 370Z Nismo, right? So it goes from 332 horsepower up to 350 horsepower. So 18 more horsepower. So you're not going to get a lot more power, but it does have better suspension. It does have better brakes. This is just a regular silver car, not my favorite color. So you can either get it painted or you don't care, or you can put a wrap on it. But this is going to come with all of the racing bits that you're going to care about going around the track. So that's why I have this guy up here for $20,499. Nice vehicle options. Yeah, thanks, Rithium. Thanks for showing up. If you have any questions, let me know. So these are the different types of vehicles that I'm going to recommend you guys in different price categories if you guys want to start going to the track. Now, the first generation BRZ 86 or FRS is also a good option. The Miata is always a good option, and A and B and C or ND Miata. Those are different nomenclature. That's how they're identified. You can also look at, let's see, what else would be a good Corvette. Corvette's always a good track option that you can do. So there's a lot of different options that you can do for your first track car, or even mine. Like I drive a 2009 Honda Civic Si. Yes, it's front wheel drive, and there are some limitations to that when you're out on the track. But you know what? I had a blast. There's a lot of different cars that you can start with, but it's just a lot of fun. And I don't just look at track cars. We can look at anything. So if you guys want me to help you find a truck, an SUV, a sedan, a coupe, a convertible, we can go ahead and take a look at that. All right, so that is all that I'm going to have on for my live stream this evening. Unless you guys have any questions, I would be glad to help you out. But for right now, that's all I have. All right, it looks like there's going to be no questions, so I'm going to tell you guys to have a wonderful night. Next week, we're going to be talking about some different stuff, so stay tuned for the next one. Let your friends and family know that I help them find cars. So let's say somebody's looking for a car, but they don't know exactly what to look for that's going to be reliable and safe and fuel efficient and has all their recalls taken care of. That's what I help people for. Again, it's only a $3 donation. I help you guys find that. So tell your friends and family on for my next live stream, so that way I can help them out. Thank you so much for joining me